Yo, what is going on, guys? Got a bit of an interesting video for you here today on why society ignores the average working man. Let's jump right into it. As always, don't forget to leave your thoughts and your comments. Let's take a listen.
I think that if you looked at the average male, female in the United States and looked at the deficits and benefits of the sex, you know, what are the advantages to being a man? What are the disadvantages? It turns out that it's just a complicated mix of blessings and burdens. There are ways in which men are privileged and ways in which women are. And it's impossible to say who's better off at this point. And it also depends on the complex set of advantages and burdens, and it varies by social class and so forth. But it's absurd to simply say the women are so much worse off and the men are. I mean, I think it's a central fallacy in feminism. They fail to notice, and well, let me put it this way. I think too much of the feminist movement focuses on men and women at the very top in professions, like how many CEOs of Fortune 500s. And it's true, there are far more men than women, and it would be, I would like to see more men who are, you know, senators and just at the top of their profession.
Yeah, of course, right? The reason why they focus on these particular professions and these particular fields is because these individuals oftentimes don't actually care about equality whatsoever. They care about getting power. Again, you know, guys, I was going through the comments of this particular video, and one dude made a great point, which was, you know, he would start caring about the amount of women in CEO positions as soon as the women started caring about the amount of men who are homeless, right? But of course they don't, guys. They don't want to equalize, you know, the amount of bricklayers or the amount of plumbers. What they're trying to equalize is, and I would argue just honestly replace, is the men in powerful positions. Now, let's be real about it. A lot of these women are not earning their powerful positions at all. Like, it's not as if a lot of women are going out here and creating their own hyper successful companies and things like this. They can, and they have been able to for many years, but typically they don't, guys, right? But yeah, of course, they're going after these powerful positions because it's not about equality. It is about power. They don't want to actually do the things that you know, is required to get power, like starting your own company or your own business and things like this, because that takes effort.
But what happens when you look further down in society and people who are not, you know, in the top 10% in terms of education and elite degrees and so forth? It's a different picture. If you look at working class men and women, it's, you know, both have burdens and challenges, and one of the special burdens that a working class young man has is he's likely to be less educated. And he's...
Okay, let me just stop you right there. I have heard this word so many times on these videos, man. You know, oh, the men are less educated. Like, can we talk about what that means? Because if you mean that there are less dudes who go like $50,000 in debt for some useless piece of paper, I should hope so. Because you have so many of these people who they go to university, they get their degree, they never use it, they're in debt, they've walked out with no practical skills whatsoever, and then they are the ones who are calling themselves educated. Oh, we're more educated than men. Are you really? You know, because that guy, right, who goes out there and does some work that doesn't require one of these stupid university degrees, and he does his own thing, he does his own work. I mean, oftentimes they're in a far more successful position than the quote-unquote educated people. Right? It's ridiculous, man. You have these like educated women who they'll look over the bricklayers, they'll look over the, you know, the plumbers and stuff because it's not, you know, it's not glamorous enough for them. But these are the guys who, number one, are the backbone of society, and number two, they're in a better position than the women anyway. it's like, yeah, you're more educated. Congratulations, you've been sold useless pieces of paper. Now, I will say this, obviously there are useful degrees. I'm not saying that there aren't. There are some fields that genuinely do require degrees, and I assume those are quite difficult to obtain. But for the most part, universities are a business, and women are getting scammed. And while they're getting scammed, they are calling themselves educated. Hilarious stuff. Great content there. Let's keep going.
Special burdens that a working class young man has is he's likely to be less educated. And he's entering an information economy where, as I keep saying, education has never been more important, and literacy has never been more important. And we have a large cohort of young men coming along who are not going to find a place for themselves in this economy. And so the fact that we have a women's movement that has only looked and primarily focused on some imbalances at the very pinnacle of society and not looked at just the reality of the lives. And to be more specific, if you look at, they'll talk about the wage gap, and that's true. There's a gap, and we want to close it, but I think we have to be honest about it. It's not as extreme as they say, and most of it's explained by the different jobs men and women do, or how many hours you work per week, things like that.
Yeah, pretty much all of it is gone. This whole wage gap thing is a complete myth, guys. Women do not work as long. They are not likely to work the extra hours. They are not likely to travel. They are not likely to do the dangerous jobs. They are not likely to do the dirty jobs or the hard labor jobs. Not saying they don't do jobs that involve labor, obviously, but you know, there are significantly less bricklayers. I think bricklayer is a fantastic example because it's one of the first things that I personally think of when I think of hard labor. You know, anything in construction, building, those sorts of things, truck drivers, all of these sorts of things. You know, but yeah,
and women do, or how many hours you work per week.
Like all the dudes are likely to do these positions. They're likely to work more hours. They're likely to travel and so on and so forth. And this makes up for pretty much all, if not all, of the quote unquote gender pay gap that everybody, and by everybody, I mean these womanists, seem to complain about. You know, like, and again, like they don't care about this. You can present them with all of the evidence, but they don't want to hear it. You know, women are treated unequally, which, by the way, if all of the women were underpaid, all of these companies would be sued. You know why? Because all the women would come out there and have a legal grounds to complain. They'd lawyer up and they'd sue the hell out of these companies. They absolutely would. They would sue the hell out of their workplaces, but they can't because a lot of these workplaces are not paying people different amounts on the basis of gender. Why? Because it's illegal, and it has been illegal for a very long time now. But no, guys, you know, all of these companies, they're just getting away with this super illegal practice, and women just earn less money magically because they're women. You know, down with the patriarchy. Am I right?
Big things like that. But also men do most of the dangerous jobs. There's a huge gap in mortality in the workplace. Like, I don't know, something like 5,000 Americans die in the workplace every year. 94% of them are men.
Whoa, whoa, we're not supposed to talk about stats here. What's going on? 94% of work-related deaths in the US are men. I'm not even shocked to hear that statistic, guys. I'm really not. I'm shocked to hear a woman talk about it, to be honest with you, because normally they don't bring this sort of crap up. But yeah, I would not be surprised if this was 100% accurate at all.
So that, that's, and then it goes for, that's mortality, but also it's true for injuries. And I mean, men do most of the dangerous, gritty jobs, the jobs where you're outside or pitching tar or on top of roofs or construction. These are largely male undertakings, and it has to be factored in when you're doing this calculus of well-being. And but we don't do that. We just don't do it. And I'm still a feminist. I believe in equality, but that means you care about men and women. And
see, no, guys, I'm not about it. You know what I mean? I'm a womanist. No, sorry. This is the thing, guys. She said something earlier that sketched me out a bit. I can't recall what it was, and I was like, I'll let it slide. I won't comment on that. I'll give her the benefit of the doubt. But no, we are a womanist, of course we are.
And you don't see, as you mentioned before, you don't see it as a competition where you have to be on one team. Because I think that also if men are in trouble or boys are in trouble, so are women.
Yeah, so I remembered now what she said earlier that kind of made me think that we had a bit of a chameleon behavior going on here, was that she said she wanted more women in CEO positions. Now, I don't know about you guys, but when I don't want women, for example, to be in fields that they don't necessarily gravitate towards. You see what I'm saying? Like, I'm not out here and I'm like, yeah, I want more women in, I don't know. Like, I don't say the same thing about any position for women. And the reason why is because I'd rather them just choose. I don't particularly give a damn. If a woman wants to go out there and become an electrician, that's great. She can do that. This is 2024. Knock yourself out. If you want to be a stay-at-home mother, knock yourself out. If you want to work as a nurse, go for it. If you want to be a doctor, go for it. I don't care what women choose to do profession. As long as, like, if they're super annoying people, if I don't have to deal with them, that's fine. Live and let live. You know what I mean? But that struck me as a bit fishy there when she was like, I want women to be in these positions. It's like, I don't even, you know, there are huge amounts of dudes who are plumbers, but I'm not out here like, yeah, we need to fight for a bit of equality in the plumbing world. It's like, no, if women don't want to be plumbers, that's fine. Let people choose what they want to do. This is what the women fought for, supposedly, but no, we still have a bit of a drive to try and get people in specific positions, which again is reflected in the fact that they don't want to be in those positions, guys. Have you ever walked into a university class, for example, in any sort of STEM field? It's like 90+% dudes. And the reason why is because dudes are the ones who want to be there. I'm not about to go out here and say, well, I want women to work in this thing. It's like, no, if they don't want to work there, I don't care. If they don't want to take the classes, I don't give a damn.
We're in this together. So what we're doing now is so perverse, because by not attending to the education of young men, there's going to be a mismatch. People typically marry someone with a similar education. That what's going to happen? I mean, we know what's happening right now. A lot of people aren't finding each other. There's a lot of loneliness. I just don't think the solution is to focus on one sex and not the other.
I want to come back to the relationship issues, the gaps that are widening. But one of the things that it seems like is happening for girls that is maybe more exaggerated in our times right now is what Jonathan Haidt's been noting about the impacts of social media in particular, and that, you know, the anxiety, the self-harm, the general psychological profile for girls seems to be collapsing farther faster than boys in response to their screen time. How have you looked at this? How do you understand what's happening to boys and girls here?
At first, I thought that Jonathan Haidt, whom I greatly respect, but at first I thought he was exaggerating and it wasn't that bad. But I'm convinced that something is amiss, and it does seem to correlate with the rise of this times girls spend on social media. And I'd be very worried as a parent. I mean, I think people are worried. I will say this, it's another reason that we should attend to gender differences, because there's these disparate impacts. So I think it's clear to me that as we pull back on recess, that had a very bad impact on boys. And schools have, by the way, cut back from, a lot of parents think it was the way it was when they were kids, but it's not at all. Some schools don't have it at all. But with girls, I would think social media, there may be a disparate impact. And Jonathan Haidt has shown evidence that there is, and it's a reason to be aware, to attend to the differences and how that may affect kids. But I will say one thing. There's one of the reasons teachers might give that they want boys to write about their feelings, and they want schools to be more feeling-centered, is that they think this is necessary to combat the dangers of, some unhinged masculinity or something. But there was a very interesting study by, I think it was Amanda Rose at the time. She was at University of Pennsylvania, and she interviewed a huge group of adolescent boys and girls, and asked them how they felt after if they had a terrible problem, how did they feel after they talked about it? Did talking about it, talking it through, make them feel better? And she asked this, 14, 15-year-old kids. And the girls said, absolutely, they felt better. They were so glad they could talk about it with their mom or their best friend. And the boys, with huge disparity. The boys said, first of all, they thought it was weird. And that was the main word that kept coming up, and a waste of time. And it didn't make them feel better.
And there you go, right? So a few things to comment on here. I would 100% believe that social media has more of a negative impact upon women's health. I think they're far more likely to compare themselves to other women than men are to compare themselves to other men, in the sense that dudes are probably going to care less, I can certainly see that being the case, and also women absolutely love things like Instagram and all of these social media applications a lot more than dudes do. They spend a significant amount of their time on there, especially compared to men. Men are far more likely to play video games. Again, not to say that women don't play video games, obviously, but women are far more likely to gravitate towards social media applications and things that are going to make you directly compare yourself to other people. And dudes are more inclined to be playing video games and things of that nature. Now, obviously, there is a crossover before anyone, I'll make a comment like that and people will be like, well, Taylor, women play video games. It's like, yes, I know women play video games. It's like the all police come to my channel. Taylor said all men do this and all women do this. Not the case, but go off. So there is that. And then onto this whole feelings thing. Yeah, of course, right? Of course, dudes don't talk about their feelings. Number one, it doesn't typically make them feel better. I've watched a small amount of this video ahead of time, and this guy goes on to make a great point about that in a moment, about how you're essentially just injuring yourself again. You go through something bad and you start talking about it. It's like, why are you reliving it? It's time to move on. So there's that point. And also, nobody gives a damn, right? If you're a dude and you don't feel great, right? You've gone through some terrible things. There's obviously something to be said for recognizing that, but you don't have I guess you could say the time to be dwelling on that. Like, number one, nobody cares, right? Like, if you go through something awful, nobody cares. You don't have all of these shoulders to cry on like women do typically. You have things to do. Men are valued for what they provide. Like, nobody, if some dude comes along and starts talking about his feelings, everybody just gets frustrated. They're like, oh, here we go. You know what I mean? Yeah, of course. Complete waste of time. I love the comment that the dudes made, by the way, these young dudes. I think she said like 15, 16-year-old guys. What did they say? They said it was weird. I totally agree. Totally agree.
How they felt after if they had a terrible problem, how did they feel after they talked about it? Did talking about it, talking it through, make them feel better? And she asked this, 14, 15-year-old kids. And the girls said, absolutely, they felt better. They were so glad they could talk about it with their mom or their best friend. And the boys, with huge disparity. The boys said, first of all, they thought it was weird. And that was the main word that kept coming up, and a waste of time.
You know why as well I think the dudes labeled this a waste of time is because, number one, it is a waste of time. But number two, if it's a problem they can solve, why the hell are we sitting here talking about it? If you're not talking about solutions to the problem, who really cares? Especially if it's solvable. Have you guys ever had somebody come to you with a problem that's a dude and they tell you the problem, but they don't want to solve it? I think those guys are just, nobody has time for those types of guys, really. I think a lot of guys don't even respect men who do that, because what's the point of talking about this problem for the sake of talking about it? Either you can solve it, which is great, so let's work on a solution, or you can't solve it, so what's the point of being frustrated about it? I think that's honestly, I think that's the healthiest way of looking at particular, these sorts of problems is like, why are you going to put yourself through more anguish dwelling on things you can't solve? And if you can solve them, then that's great. Let's have a discussion about how we can actually solve it. That's what I want to hear personally, guys. I think a lot of men are probably the same way, is, they don't have patience for the nonsense. And And it's not about trying to be rude or disrespectful or anything like that. It's actually trying to be respectful, right? Trying to appreciate the time that you have. Why are you going to sit here and spend the precious time you do have dwelling on this nonsense? Makes no sense to me. I think a lot of dudes think the same way, to be honest.
And it didn't make them feel better. And we have a lot of evidence that this is a difference. So most people rush in and say, well, that's not good for the boys. But actually what they found was that the boys were a little more stoical and could sort of.
You know what's bad for men, right? Number one, telling them what they should and shouldn't be feeling and how to process it, right? So screw off as far as I'm concerned there. And number two, you know what would be more detrimental for the men? Probably wasting their time not fixing problems. Like, I don't understand this logic, guys. It's like, you have a problem, but apparently it's better for you if you just sit there and talk about it, as opposed to try and do anything else with your time, whether that be constructive or just straight up moving on. Can somebody please explain to me how this is a better course of action? Because it makes no sense.
Compartmentalize and move on. And the girls were ruminators. When they had a problem, they wanted to talk about it, and they thought about it, and they ruminated it. And these psychologists concluded that maybe girls would be better off if we encouraged a little more stoicism, rather than spending all our efforts to get the boys to be ruminators and constantly talking about how I felt and what it meant, and which most of them don't want to do. And any mother of a boy will, or father may know about this. But what if it turns out that that's adaptive, and that what the boys are doing is may be helpful to them? And
wow,
maybe
no way.
we've, in this highly therapeutic society where we're so focused on people's emotional states and things, maybe girls have a tendency for that. Maybe we've exaggerated it, and now they have to cope with all of the highs and lows that can be brought on by social media, and what people are saying about you, what's going on, all that. It may be just impossible. So
yeah, what a crazy thought. What if what the men were saying, what if we actually just listened to them for once? What a shocking thing. It's like, you come to dudes, you ask them a series of questions, the men answer the questions, and then oftentimes the women and these womanists, they just go on to completely ignore what the men say, and then they try and extrapolate their own meaning. Men said they didn't want to talk about their problems. Oh, the solution apparently is we just have to make men do things that they don't want to do, they're not interested in doing, and they haven't been doing for a very, very long time. Probably for a good reason, mind you. Like, yeah, straight to ignoring men. So hilarious, so ridiculous, man. I give to you the education system, Yeah, let's just sit dudes in a classroom for like many hours a day, make them talk about their feelings, make them listen to people who are quite honestly a lot of the time incompetent. Don't let them learn any actual skills. Then propagandize them, I suppose is the word, to go to places like university where they're also not going to learn a bunch of skills. They're going to be in a bunch of debt. I mean, it's ridiculous. I think the life plan that is laid out for people, particularly men these days, is incredibly stupid. Like a complete waste of time, going to make you mentally unwell if you stick to it and actually listen to what these people have to tell you. I think it's ridiculous. I think you're better off just listening to dudes at the start. They want to go outside. They want to learn things. They don't want to sit inside and talk about their feelings or their particular problems. They would rather solve the problems. Now, I can't speak for women, guys. I'm not a psychologist for women. If you want to sit there and ruminate on your problems, as women are more likely to do, that's totally fine. Like, I'm not here to tell women what to do. I don't really give a damn. But I will say it doesn't seem to be working out too well for the women. A lot of them are incredibly medicated. They have ever increasing signs of being diagnosed of XYZ. So to me, it doesn't seem like it's working out for them. Am I here to tell them what to do? No. Do I think ruminating on problems is a good idea? No, I don't. But, I'm not their father, so it is what it is. Let's keep going.
it just may be unfortunate that all of these things have come into play at once, and the sensitivity of girls, which we have encouraged, is helping, adding to the misery.
It strikes me that there's something kind of perverse at play with this focus on therapy and on talking about and ruminating on problems, partly because it seems to me like when you conjure up the feeling of something that was painful, you essentially re-injure yourself to some extent. To some extent, you relive the experience. And it seems like there's a feedback loop there that is not fundamentally healing, but is actually sort of a multi-layered traumatizing that goes on.
Everything is classified as traumatic. That
I think what this dude just said is a great point, by the way, is like, let's just say you go through something bad, okay, or you have a particular problem that, say, for example, you can't solve. Why the hell are you just sitting there and thinking about it more? You know, all that you're doing is just causing yourself more anguish over a situation that is in all likelihood unsolvable. And if it is solvable, then that's easy. You go out there and you find a solution. You know, if it's a solution you can implement, that's great. If you can't, again, go back to A. Don't stress about it. You know, I know it sounds kind of stupid, but it really is that way. Focus on the things you can control. There's a great quote about that. I can't recall it word for word, but I do think this guy makes a great point. Is like, if you're sitting there and you're ruminating on things, essentially what you're doing is you're just inflicting yourself with the annoyance of going through that particular experience or that particular problem for a second, third, fourth, however many times. It's ridiculous. Waste of time.
That goes on.
everything is classified as traumatic. That used to be just, well, first of all, if you think back to how children grew up in the previous generations, I mean, life was a lot harder. And I don't wish hard life on my child, and I'm guilty of being a helicopter parent as much as anyone else. It's just, it's impossible not to. But on the other hand, I recognize that my parents were more aloof. They were too busy with life to, and challenges, and 3 kids, and they were very young, and they, basically, they just didn't pay that much attention to us until, you had to be home at 9 in the summer before dark. And I don't ever remember them calling up a teacher or anything. I didn't want them to have anything to do with my school. And now parents are so involved, and the child, I'm worried that they're really not learning basic skills of just how to deal with the challenge of life. If you talk to psychologists now, and they've had to increase their numbers at colleges, practically all the kids have a diagnosis, and they're coming for they can't solve the problem. They don't like their roommate or something. They don't seem to have the skills to deal with adversity. And so that's something else and I think Abigail's book was a great reminder to parents that there might be a better way than treating everything is an occasion for examining your inner feelings. Sometimes it's better just to move on. And that goes against the ethos, but it may explain why boys are having a less difficult time with social media.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. It's just dudes are probably better off just because they're moving on from these particular issues. Now, I wanted to go back to what we were originally talking about, by the way, insofar as being overlooked, right? If you're an average guy, you don't have these university degrees and things like this. This is an article I wanted to quickly, just very briefly go over here. This was from a little while ago, this fairly recently, all things considered. But check this out, okay? Lack of quote-unquote economically attractive men who blame for the decline in marriage rates, study suggests, okay? And I have said this on the channel many times before, but oftentimes dudes are, they are loved, quote unquote loved, by the way, to the extent that they can provide something. If you are unable to provide something, then nobody gives a damn. And so what happens when you have these university degrees and these pieces of paper is these individuals, particularly the women, they correlate your earning power to whether or not you have a degree a lot of the times. Oh, he doesn't have a degree, he's not going to be able to provide for me, I'm just going to ignore him. Now, little do they realize that a lot of these degrees are completely useless, complete waste of time, and so on, and that the guy who's, for example, a tradie or whatever, oftentimes in better positions. Apparently, there's a lack of economically attractive men, and that's why marriage rates are declining. Now, it's not because, obviously, that there are no women worth marrying these days, or because of the divorce laws that are likely to completely screw men over. No, of course, it is always the men's fault, right? Let's not listen to men. Let's always make it men's fault. But guys, I think we're going to leave today's episode there. A bit of a long one. As always, don't forget to leave your thoughts and your comments to this video. Make sure you guys take care of yourselves, and I'll be seeing you all in the next episode. Peace.